Good morning, everybody, and welcome to It's a New Day. Kim Kennedy here, welcoming you to the program. As always, we're so glad that you're with us. And this morning, I'd like to introduce you to a state representative all the way from Idaho. No, he's not in the studio in person, but he is with us via phone. And before we get into our topic today, Representative Greg Chaney, and welcome, I was wondering if you could share with our listeners a little bit about yourself and your political background.
Well, thank you for having me here, Kim. And so I am a lawyer by trade. In Idaho, we have a part-time legislature like most of the state, and so I'm a recent addition to the Idaho State Bar. I've been in office for coming up on 5 years now. I've been a member of the legislature for 5 sessions. Went through law school as part of in the legislature, taking evening classes during session, and so it's been kind of an amalgam from the very start between the political side and the legal side. But I have a real passion for criminal justice type issues and civil rights and that sort of thing. I am a conservative Republican, and so I know a lot of times the presumption is that this sort of a passion is a partisan type passion, but that's just not the case. Recently, I was named the new chairman for the House Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee after the sitting chairman was appointed to a federal post by the White House. So excited to get to work come next January when we convene again in a new role as the chairman, and look forward to advocating policies that are fair to everyone.
Wonderful. Excellent. Well, you're bringing to our attention today a growing controversy about a key aspect of national criminal justice reform, and that is pretrial risk assessment algorithms. You're very, very concerned about the potentially negative effects on minorities that you've taken this on as your own personal crusade, and you're addressing it outside of Idaho. Very recently, you wrote an open letter to the members of the Colorado Senate in which you offered your perspective on their House Bill 1226, a criminal justice reform bill. You advised them that voting on the bill be delayed until they could thoroughly evaluate the possible unintended consequences that its passage might bring. Please enlighten us. What is going on here?
Well, what's going on is there are several computerized programs that use algorithms or predictive technologies to try to predict as best they can the likelihood that a defendant that's been brought in on charges is either not going to show up to trial or is going to commit another crime while they're out awaiting trial. And so it really is like trying to recommend somebody be held in jail for something they haven't done yet. And so it's like the old early 2000s movie Minority Report, where everybody was up in arms about this secret program that tried to predict what people were going to do before they did it and then essentially punish them. These systems recommend to judges either that defendants not be released or that they be released based on these predictive technologies and once again, things that they have not done yet. And some of it really sounds logical. Previous crimes, previous times not arriving for court at the appropriate time and so forth. But just like in the movie, there's a great deal of secrecy around the processes that are built into a lot of these programs. And in many states, when defendants have challenged these programs in court, they were denied access to the methodology that was being used. And this is methodology that's effectively telling somebody they're not allowed to get out of jail and go back to their families and jobs and hold their lives together while they're awaiting trial on charges. And these are people who haven't been convicted yet. And so this secrecy is protected by a concept known as trade secret protection. And so even though it's a criminal proceeding, the manufacturers of these programs have successfully argued that they shouldn't be compelled to kind of tip their hand because it's a trade secret. So people are being held in jail based on criteria they can't evaluate. And one thing that's become very apparent is when the data is analyzed on what's coming out on the other end, one, these predictive technologies are only about getting it right about 65% of the time. But when they err differently for minorities and for Caucasians. For Caucasians, when they err on the side of turning people loose that shouldn't be out. In fact, we had a recent incident here in Idaho where there was a defendant who had been arrested after attacking an elderly woman. And then when the police arrived, tried to stab officers with a set of scissors. And he was released without any bond whatsoever because the computer said so. So we're allowing people out that shouldn't be let out. And that's an error on the side of releasing dangerous people if they're Caucasian. However, what the data also shows is that it overestimates the rate at which African Americans and other minorities will either not show up to court or commit a subsequent crime while they're awaiting trial. So they are holding people that are minorities in jail that should not be held in jail in the first instance. And so there's a real disparity in how one group of people is being treated versus the other. In all, the same number of, approximately the same percentage of error happens for Caucasians and minorities, but once again, the error is completely in a different direction for the minorities.
Okay, well, that is significant. And if that is being relied on, is it countrywide, or is it just a few states that use this system?
Most states are using something that's very similar. I got interested in this because Idaho was starting to really advocate a widespread rollout of this technology. More populated states have been using it for quite some time. Florida, Los Angeles County in California, the state of Texas. And what we saw come out of the state of Texas was there was one county manager who decided to use fatherlessness as a predictor in their algorithm to try to find out if they could better predict the rate of recidivism or not showing up to court. And, you know, your parental status is like race, a protected status under the United States Constitution. So we are seeing some evidence that criteria are being put into these systems that no judge would ever verbalize using, because no judge could constitutionally use the criteria that's in there. And the lack of transparency really creates some concerns around whether or not what's happening and what the rate of bias and prejudice coming out of these systems is, whether it's a mere, not to say that it wouldn't be equally serious if it were a reflection of existing bias, but at the very least it would be, if it was merely a reflection of existing bias, then there's nothing overtly nefarious about using these systems. But with the lack of transparency, we don't know. But what there isn't some sort of criteria slipped in that perhaps, if not just flat out asking race, has the kind of predictive questions or predictive criteria that for a given area might be more descriptive of a certain ethnic group than another. And so the lack of transparency is truly, in my mind, frightening when you're talking about restraining somebody's liberty based on a secret.
Yes, the legislator should be able to examine how that's put together, what the criteria is, and I understand your concern there. You are looking to fight back against House Bill 1226 in the Colorado House of Representatives. You have put together your own bill in Idaho, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So before the Colorado bill came up, we had already vetted this issue in Idaho, which is why I decided to go ahead and send a letter down to our comrade legislators down in Colorado as they were struggling with the same issue, because we had looked into this very thoroughly. I sponsored House Bill 118 this year that did pass both chambers and was signed by Governor Little into law. And what House Bill 118 does is it guarantees the transparency in the system. It guarantees that defendants have the right to evaluate the criteria, that the public has the right to evaluate the criteria and the statistics, and that no manufacturer is permitted to hide the methodology behind the trade secret declaration.
Okay, and so, what is the response of the what shall we say, the criminal justice community to this? Is this well known, what's happening?
Well, I don't think that rank and file, even attorneys really understood what was going on with the algorithms here in Idaho, which is part of the alarm I wanted to sound for Colorado as they were considering rolling out their use of these things more statewide. But I don't think most people were aware, but those that were, there seems to be a general attitude among police and prosecutors that this is a really bad idea. There seems to be a general attitude among defense attorneys and judges that it is a really good idea. I think that like a lot of states, Idaho is struggling with jail overcrowding. We're the fastest growing state per capita in the nation right now. We're busting at the seams in our old infrastructure. And so I think there's this grasping for efficiency. But our system was not built to be efficient. And that's a concept that I don't speak lightly, because I'm an advocate for efficiency in government and in everything else. But our criminal justice system was not designed to efficiently put people behind bars. It was designed to guarantee individual liberties. And those two things can run contrary to one another. And when we err, we should err on the side of making sure we're getting it right and not err on the side of mere efficiency. And so I think that the advocates of this technology are looking for a more efficient system, a better predictive way of doing things. And I think to a certain degree, there may be inherent in that a bit of a willingness to break a few eggs to make an omelet, as it were, that even if it's not perfect, if the computer does it, then at the very least there's a distance between the human actors in the criminal justice system and the recommendation of the computer. And you can just blame the computer on why somebody's not getting out, or blame the computer on why somebody did get out and commit another heinous crime. And I understand that our judges do a good job, and I understand that they're in a very tough situation making these calls just off of human intuition. But this is technology that simply is not ready to be rolled out on the scale that it's being attempted to be rolled out nationwide.
So you're recommending that it be re-examined, and it really needs some more testing and improving before we implement it?
Yes, I think that this is newer technology. I think there are probably ways that it could be improved upon. We had a Boise State University statistician come testify, not on behalf of the university, but on behalf of himself, talked about ways of trying to get the bias out of these systems. And I think might be a way sometime in the future to use these. But I think that it's being rolled out too quickly before it's being fully vetted, that the effects of these systems is being seen years after the fact in some areas like LA County and in Florida, other places. And we need to just take a deep breath. And while I understand the need for efficiency and my goodness, if we could really do the minority report thing and really for real, without violating anybody's rights, predict who was okay to let out and who wasn't, then who can be opposed to that? But it's technology that can't deliver on what it promises to the degree that it promises to do it. And it's technology that can't deliver to any degree without some inherent civil rights violations.
Representative Chaney, with the 4 minutes we have left, just a statement on your views on the current push to reform criminal justice nationally.
Well, I think that we need to continue to look for ways to reform how our criminal justice system is rolled out. My hesitation to this technology isn't by any means an objection to change or new ways of doing things. I think the First Step Act was a fantastic first step in changing federal criminal justice. I think you see a big push here in this state for sentencing reform, but I also think we need to really refocus on what are we doing with our inmates while they're incarcerated and what are we doing with them after they get out. I'm aware that Rhode Island has a really good system, for example, to help those who are addicted to substances such as heroin or methamphetamine after they're released. And we need to continue to look at those options. I think that sometimes we, even in our discussions to reform criminal justice, fall into the old conversation of to incarcerate or not to incarcerate. Well, I think that if we really want to push for reform, we need to engage in a much more nuanced conversation of why are we incarcerating and what are we doing while they're behind bars that's going to help them when they get back out. And are we giving them the support system they need and the accountability system they need on the other side? So I think that the awareness is an awareness that the way we've been doing things for the last 30, 40 years didn't give us the results that we wanted. We need to be cautious not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we also need to be willing to take bold actions both in sentencing and in what are we doing with the inmates while they're under the jurisdiction of our respective departments of correction.
That's extremely well stated. I appreciate your summary of that. Basically, let's think about the individual crimes and is what we're doing helping the problem or just continuing to propagate it? Something to think about, a lot to think about there, Representative Chaney. It's been a very informative conversation. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to visit with us, and we look forward to hearing from you with any updates in the future.
Most certainly. Thank you, Kim.
You're welcome. Listeners, stay with us. You're listening to It's a New Day here on WFYL 1180, working for your liberty and things that matter. We'll be right back.